Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Today we will talk about really two vines that have herbal properties that I use a lot. I use these vines a whole lot, but I really don't use them as much as I should for their herbal properties. They are Parthenocissus, which is in my area most commonly Virginia creeper, but there are a couple of varieties of creeper. I think I'll have to check my notes. I can't remember the other name, but Virginia creeper is often mistaken for poison ivy, but it has 5 leaves, whereas poison ivy has 3 leaves. So it's actually pretty easy to tell apart. It does have some medicinal properties, which we'll get into. It's so great for making baskets. I mean, it's really one of my go-to vines for making baskets. It will grow. Well, I'd say probably Virginia creeper, wisteria, ivy, and kudzu are the vines I use most. And kudzu will be the second plant we talk about, and it has amazing medicinal properties. It has all kinds of amazing useful properties, far beyond herbal medicine, basket weaving, food. It's edible, makes fiber. Kudzu's starch. I mean, it's just really incredible. So we'll talk about that. I've done a whole show on kudzu before, so I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on kudzu this time, if you'll pardon the expression, as most people would consider kudzu quite the noxious weed. It is the vine that ate the South, after all. But anyway, I hope everyone is home safe and warm. Awful weather right now. I'm snowed in. Got about, I don't know, they said 5.5 inches of snow. Then they said 3 to 6. It's looking to me like we got more in the 6-inch range, and about 12 degrees. Yeah, it's pretty darn cold. At least we did not get the wind they had predicted. But, you know, if you're not used to this weather, well, it's probably too late now, but I did a show a couple weeks ago on Prepper Broadcasting Network, if you want to look that up, about how to prepare for winter weather. Maybe they say some of the country's going to get another round of this stuff. But, you know, it's just simple, common sense things that I guess a lot of people don't think about. But just basically stocking up on food and water, you know, making sure you have some sources of heat and blankets, and making sure that source of heat is not going to suffocate you. You know, simple stuff, really. Batteries, radios, that's optional. But it's just a matter of thinking ahead and being prepared. I mean, like, you know, a week ago we had an ice storm, and similar cold temperatures. Went out, crank up the vehicle, and the battery's dead. Of course it is. It went down to 13 degrees, and I left it out there and didn't put a trickle charger or a drip charger on it. Neighbor came over and jumped the car off, and I was fine, you know. Drove around, got everything charged back up. My truck battery was dead. Got it in. It still had enough life in it. I could put a trickle charger on it and just let it charge. Now, I have a charger. I have jumper cables. I probably need to get one of those like power bank jump starters. I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to add that to the list for next year. Maybe even for this year. I don't know. Yeah, definitely before we go through another winter. In case that neighbor hadn't been around, you know, I would have been having to pay somebody to come out and jump the vehicle off. And that's, you know, totally unnecessary. It was one of those things I could have thought about in advance. You know, even if I hadn't had a charger, and they're very cheap. You can get one for about $10 at Harbor Freight. I mean, you know, you can really. But even if I hadn't had one, if I was thinking ahead, I would have disconnected the battery cables, taken the battery out of the vehicle, and brought it in the house and kept it warm. And the battery wouldn't have lost charge. But I wasn't thinking ahead. Now, I mean, I may be prepared in a lot of different ways. I got my weather radio, and I got my 3 or 4 different ways to heat a house. I've got my blankets, and I've got my sleeping bag, and I've got food, and I've got water, and, you know, everything, first aid and tools that I might need. I mean, you know, things that I can think of, candles, lanterns, oil lamps, just, you know, anything I can plan out and think ahead. There's when I drop the ball. So really good in a time like this to make a list. Make a list of what you wish you had right now that you don't have. Then start remedying that. Start buying. I mean, you don't have to go break the bank. You can pick up one item every week or one item every month. And by next winter, you're going to be in a lot better position than you are right now. It's really that simple. People talk about preppers like they're crazy, you know, preparing for the zombie apocalypse, stocking up on guns and ammo and who knows what else. No, really, most people that would call themselves preppers. I always say I'm not really a prepper. I just kind of grew up in this lifestyle where a hurricane or an ice storm or a blizzard could hit and we'd be out of power for a few weeks. Grew up on a farm. Grew up growing food, storing food, preparing food. We had a well, you know. We had there was the electric pump for the well. There was also a hand pump if needed. You know, cutting firewood. This is just my lifestyle. I don't really consider myself a prepper. If I said anything, it'd be more of a homesteader. But where I'm living right now, I can't have livestock because of all the bears and coyotes. So I don't really feel like I can call myself a homesteader at this point right now. But I definitely grew up in that environment. And that's just the way I look at things. But you don't have to go nuts with it. Just look around and think, did the power go out? Would an emergency generator help? If so, you know, look into generators. Don't wait till the last minute. Was the power outage widespread? Did you lose cell coverage and internet and all that kind of stuff? Well, maybe you want to look into a cheap shortwave radio or like a Baofeng. I mean, those things cost like $20, and you put a whip antenna on there instead of the antenna that comes with it, and you can get your police scanner channels, you can send emergency messages, you can get the weather radio. Maybe you just need a weather radio to tell you what was happening when everything went down and you had no access to information. That's a very real thing. Think about that, you know. Think about heat. I like to keep a kerosene heater and 5 or 10 gallons of kerosene on hand. Some people are very opposed to a kerosene heater. But, you know, fireplace just usually won't do the job. That's unless you want to sleep by it. Wood stove, certainly a better option. You know, maybe you want to look at some kind of backup heat for your house. Just think about things like that. I always keep, well, I usually keep about 30 days of food on hand one way or the other, whether it's canned goods, dry beans and rice, or meat in the freezer, you know, vegetables frozen and blanched, or whatever. Usually got, almost all the time, a good 30 days of food on hand. And I'm not talking prepper food. I'm not talking MREs and all that nasty freeze-dried stuff. I'm talking real food. The same stuff I would be eating every day. Just make sure I'm fully stocked. And I add to it instead of depleting it, and just kind of rotate and, make sure you're using things when they need to be used. Water is an issue for a lot of people. I'm a single guy. It's easy. You figure you need about a gallon a day. All right. 30 gallons of water, I'm set. I mean, that's not going to flush the toilet, but I have access to other water that can just go take a bucket and fill up the toilet. If you got a family, you got to extrapolate that out. You got to add another 30 gallons per month for each member of your household. If you're in a city and you have no access to rivers and creeks and springs, you don't have a way to catch rainwater, you're going to have to store a lot more water, because in a city, when the water goes out, it can get really bad very quickly. So I prioritize things the way most prepper-minded people do: shelter, first aid, water, and sometimes you want to put first aid first. I mean, obviously, if you got a compound fracture or some big cut, but that's a lot of what we do in herbal medicine. We should have our first aid supplies on hand anyway. For the cuts, I'm going to have the pine pitch. I know how to set a bone. I've dislocated several joints. I've broken several bones. I usually fix them myself. Once I've had a cast. That was it. And I've broken several bones. I don't get too upset about things like that. I just set them back, chew myself out for doing something stupid that got me hurt, and I'm set. I got some stored food and everything. I don't have to leave the house for a few weeks. I can let things heal up. I mean, I'm self-employed. You might want to think along those lines too. Always be looking for self-employment, cottage industry, reducing debt as much as possible, so that when the weather's bad, you don't have to go out. You get hurt or injured or sick, you don't have to go out. You can actually take the time, or if a family member, you can take time to take care of a family member. That's long-term planning. I would put that on the list, but start thinking about ways you might do that. Sometimes it can be as simple as some of the stuff I do, like making baskets and carving wooden spoons. People buy them. That's great. I'm super appreciative of that. That helps me not have to go out and work a 9-to-5 somewhere. My books, my podcasts, that's the full picture. But your talents may be completely different. You may do something, food-oriented or clothing-oriented, just completely different. Maybe you're consulting in some way. Maybe you're learning to be an herbalist, and these days you can do herbal consultations right over the internet. That's fantastic. You don't actually have to have sick people walking into your space all the time. Always had an issue with that. I've never really been happy. I never wanted to be a doctor, in other words. I much rather teach about herbs, but I know some of you, you really want to be hands-on and help people. I absolutely admire that. But think about short-term what you need, and maybe long-term goals you want to work toward. And now let's get into, and I'm just, other than that, just try to stay warm and safe, and I hope you'll be all right, So now let's get into the herbs. So, Parthenocissus. We have Virginia creeper, that's the main one. Boston ivy is actually a version of Parthenocissus, and there's also a thicket creeper. The three varieties really have documented use in herbal medicine. That's Parthenocissus Himalayan Parthenocissus. There we go. Parthenocissus cinquefoil. That's I'm sorry, not cinquefoil, but quinquefoil, meaning 5 leaves. Quinquefoil, Virginia creeper, and the Parthenocissus tricuspidata. That's Boston ivy. And let me get a sip of my water here. Oh, there we go. This cold, dry air is kind of tickling my throat a little bit, and my nose, apparently. All right, so Miss Greaves says, the common creeper is familiar to all on account of its rapid growth and the magnificence of its autumn coloring. Yes, it's very pretty, by the way. The leaves turn usually bright orange or something along that lines. It is especially useful in town gardens, and it is not affected by the smoky atmosphere. At this time, she's writing from England, 1930s. Everybody was burning coal, and they had a lot of smoke, and it would settle very heavily on things. And the ivies and creepers were much used as ornamental plants for that reason. They're pretty darn hardy. It's pretty hard to kill them off. She says the stem is extensively climbing, reaching out in all directions, and fastening itself by the disc-like appendages of the tendrils, and also by rootlets. It will shoot about 20 feet in 1 year and becomes very woody. Yes, that's why it's so great for making baskets. I can cut it back, and I've always got fresh growth. I like to harvest them in fall, after the winter. Not when they're in their growing stage. The vine tends to be stronger in the fall and winter. She says the leaves have long petioles. They do have blue-purplish berries. Let's see, what does she say about medicinal use? It's more like what we're interested in. First of all, she says part used is the bark and twigs. Tincture made from the fresh young shoots of the bark, which are chopped and pounded into a pulp, mixed with 2 parts weight by alcohol, left for 8 days in the dark before being strained and filtered off. The tincture is not official in either the United States or British pharmacopoeia. The general name hedera is supposed to be derived from the Celtic hedera or cord, or could be from the Greek hedra or seat. We don't really need to get into all that, but always interesting. Constituents, now we don't need to get into that. Oxyphenic acid and schizotannic acid, etc. In scrofulous affections, the drug is principally employed in the form of a syrup. So for scrofula, medicinal uses and actions, it's stimulating, diaphoretic, and cathartic. Stimulating probably to the digestive system, though she doesn't really say. Diaphoretic means helps with a fever, and cathartic is going to clean you out. Many virtues were attributed by our forefathers to this plant. Its berries have been used in febrile disorders, feverish issues, and were regarded as specific against the plague and similar disorders, for which they were infused in vinegar. During the Great Plague of London, ivy berries were given with some success for their antiseptic virtues and to induce perspiration. In India, the leaves are used as stimulant, antispasmodic, and emmenagogue, means can bring on menses. The gum has mild aperient properties. They would dissolve it in vinegar. Okay. The leaves have a very unpleasant taste. Really, Virginia creeper has some toxicity to it. I mean, I've never used it internally, actually. So, and the same is true of the ivies. And she's talking specifically of Boston ivy, but I've talked otherwise about English ivies and such. All of them have some toxicity that could be a little dangerous. Decoction of the leaves applied externally will destroy head lice in children, and fresh ivy leaves bruised and applied will afford great relief to bunions and corns, a remedy to the excellence of which John Wesley has testified. The leaves have also been employed as poultices and fomentations in glandular enlargements and indolent ulcers. Yeah, I mean, most of the use is kind of external, I think. At least that I would be comfortable with. Decoction has been used as a black dye. The berries possess the same properties as the leaf, being more strongly purgative and emetic. In other words, they're going to make you throw up. But they've been found serviceable in rheumatic or arthritic complaints and have helped cure the dropsy, which is edema, water retention. Dried bark also used in decoction. And that to make that decoction, stripped from the branches after the berries have ripened and dried in the sun. Let's see, and just boiled down. So, standard decoction. Botany in a Day says the bark and twigs have astringent and expectorant properties and are often used as a tea for colds. I've never tried. It's interesting. Expectorant, astringent, and expectorant. Says it also helps with fevers. Miss Greaves said. All right. So maybe I will have to explore Virginia creeper a little bit as a tea for colds. Plants for Future says specifically a Virginia creeper. The bark and fresh young shoots are a aperient, alterative, emetic, expectorant, and tonic. A hot decoction has been used as a poultice to help reduce swellings. A tea made from the leaves is astringent and diuretic. It is used as a wash on swellings and poison ivy rash. That's interesting. It's always that concept in herbalism that things tend to grow together. like dock will grow near nettles, right? And if you get stung by nettles, you can rub dock leaves on there, take away the sting. Well, interestingly, the poison ivy could be helped by a tea made from the leaves of Virginia creeper. They'll often be found and grown right beside each other. A tea made from the plant is used in the treatment of jaundice. A tea is made from the roots of the treatment of gonorrhea and diarrhea. The fruit can be useful in treating fevers. Now, known hazards, parthenosis, this is the quinquefolia, I guess, the Virginia creeper. Berries can for many people, let's try it one more time. Berries can be, for many people, poisonous and cause nausea, abdominal pain, bloody vomiting, and diarrhea, dilated pupils, headache, sweating, weak pulse, drowsiness, twitching of the face. So I'm going to say I'm not using those berries internally. I'm probably going to look into the use of the bark and the leaves. So skin contact with the leaves in autumn can cause dermatitis in some people. And the tissue of the plant contains microscopic, irritating, needle-like crystals called raphides. So I'm definitely thinking I like this one better for external use, but I'll have to explore it a little bit. Now, Peterson Field Guides for Central and Eastern Medicinal Plants says the American Indians used plant tea for jaundice, root tea for gonorrhea and diarrhea, leaf tea was used to wash swellings and poison sumac rash, mixed with vinegar for wounds and for lockjaw. It is astringent and diuretic. Warning: berries reportedly toxic, leaves toxic. Touching the autumn may cause dermatitis, but interestingly enough, the physician's desk reference for herbal medicine doesn't really give a bunch of warnings. It just says the plant is diaphoretic, astringent, and tonic. Amazing, really, I think. So Kudzu, the vine that ate the South. I love kudzu. I really do. I love kudzu. Yes, it takes over. Yes, it is almost impossible to control unless you have goats. It's destroyed. I mean, so much native so-called growth. I mean, native to win. Everything came here from somewhere else at some point in time. Kudzu's a relatively recent introduction, just having been introduced right around 1900, 1920. It's one of my favorite wild edibles. The leaves, they have a little furry quality to them. You have to cook them, and then they're just like spinach, but they're full of protein. They're really one of the most nutritional plant foods you can eat. The flowers taste like grape jelly. I mean, you can make jelly out of them. You can eat them. You can make wine out of them. They're just fantastic. The roots are full of starch. I mean, this is one of the most important edible plants there is. As far as the vines, they're so abundant. Yeah, you can weave them into baskets, and they're going to be really great, sturdy baskets that you can probably sell for a couple $100 a piece. I mean, if you get good at basket weaving, if not more. People really like kudzu baskets. You could make a whole hut. I mean, seriously, out of kudzu vines. I mean, you could weave kudzu vines into an actual livable structure if you needed to, if you were stuck in the woods. They're amazing. They can be redded, is what it's called. It just means basically rotted down, fermented, and processed for fiber. It's like a fine linen fiber. It's incredibly strong. You can make fishing lines out of it. You can make clothing out of it. It is probably the best hay-type plant feed for animals because it's got so much nutrition. It's got protein. If you have livestock and can keep it under control, it may be illegal for you to grow purposefully on your property, but if there was some on my property, I'd be encouraging it, honestly. Really amazing stuff. And yes, it will take over. And poor old Channing Cope got blamed for that. You know, he was one of the fathers. I've told this story before. If you've heard it before, just fast forward for about 30 seconds, right? But Channing Cope wrote for the newspaper in Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He was really one of the founding fathers of permaculture. At that point in time, the American South was just being washed away. I mean, we basically had our own dust bowl here, except it was more clay-type soil, so it wasn't as dusty. But, I mean, farms were just really suffering, and the South was in really bad financial straits. And he had this vision of taking this newly introduced kudzu and using it to control erosion and growing it as livestock feed. And his vision was called the front porch farmer, where you got your kudzu established, you had a pond or a creek, and you turned your cattle out, and you made a fortune off of beef cattle. And it would have worked perfectly well. It did work perfectly well. But the government decided, we'll just plant it by the roadsides and by streams and everything to prevent erosion. And they didn't have the aspect of animals feeding on it. And it took over. Well, instead of people blaming the government, they blamed Channing Cope. And he died hated, despised. What he came up with that should have been one of the greatest boons to humanity became something that caused him to die a very sad, alcoholic recluse. And it's a terrible story. He was a big, boisterous, storytelling, joking, full of life guy, and his great idea that was screwed up by the government really didn't turn out well for him. And it's a shame. Say a prayer for Channing Cope and his family. People would actually drive from other states to pee on his grave. That's how hated he was after he died. And he was a pretty good guy. Pretty good guy that deserved a whole lot better in terms of legacy. Destroyed his family. Destroyed everything. Really very smart guy. And anyway, same thing basically happened with Bill Mollison in Australia, the official father of permaculture. They were having all kinds of trouble with erosion and fires and everything, and he planted a bunch of locust trees. And I think they were honey locusts. They did great. They saved the land, but the thorns became a problem for everybody. They would tear tires, they'd rip clothes, they'd poke you, and at one point he was pretty much hated in a certain part of Australia for solving the problem that no one else could solve with a plant that people decided they didn't like. And that's a shame. That's a real shame. But anyway, medicinal uses of kudzu. The kudzu vine in China, commonly used in Chinese herbal medicine. It's one of the 50 fundamental herbs, in fact. Recent research has shown that the compounds diadzine and diadzin, I guess, which are contained in the roots and flowers, are a safe and effective method for treating alcohol abuse. Now, how ironic is that? Channing Cope died an alcoholic, and he had the plant that actually helps cure alcoholism. Wow. Huh? I mean, that's, the irony. Yeah. They work by suppressing the appetite for alcohol, whereas existing treatments interfere with the way alcohol is metabolized. And they can actually cause a buildup of toxins, like antabuse and such. It actually makes you get sick if you drink alcohol. Kudzu root actually just takes away the desire to drink alcohol. The flowers and roots are antidote, antiemetic, helps prevent vomiting, antipyretic, antispasmodic, demulcent. There's so many words here. I don't want to define them all. Softening, breaks a fever, helps with digestion, hypoglycemic. The kudzu can actually lower blood sugar. Hypotensive, which means can actually lower, high blood pressure. A concoction of the flowers and tubers is used to treat alcoholism, fevers, colds, diarrhea, dysentery, acute intestinal obstructions, etc. It is useful in the treatment of angina pectoris and migraine, chest pains and migraine. The root is frequently used as a remedy for measles, often in combination with Semicifuga foetida. The root contains puerin. Boy, there's some hard words in this one. This increases the blood flow to the coronary artery and protects against acute myocardial ischemia caused by the injection of pituritin. The root can be harvested from autumn to spring and is used fresh or dried. The flowers are harvested just before they are fully open and dried for later use. The stem sargalactagogue means increases breast milk, and also applied as a poultice to incipient boils, swellings, sore mouths, etc. The seed is used in the treatment of hangovers and dysentery, and the leaves are styptic, which means it helps stop bleeding. As you can see, literally, kudzu is like a pharmacy in a plant. It is so useful and so edible. And when they say the root can be harvested in the fall, yeah, get a few friends to go help. The roots can often be bigger than a full-grown man. They're huge. They are huge. And when you process them for food, of course, it's a lot of food. It's a lot of medicine. I mean, it is abundant. It's really fantastic. Peterson Field Guide says, in China, the root tea is used for headaches, diarrhea, dysentery, acute intestinal obstruction, gastroenteritis, deafness. I don't even know how that works. Used to promote measles eruption, make the blisters kind of come to a head, essentially. Induces sweating. Experimentally, it lowers blood sugar and blood pressure. Flower tea used for stomach acidity. It is said to awaken the spleen. I guess it's stimulative to the spleen. I don't know. Expels drunkenness. Yes, kudzu can actually help sober people up. Seeds used for dysentery and to expel drunkenness. Stem poultice for sores, swellings, mastitis. Tea gargle for sore throats. Root starch used to stimulate the production of bodily fluids and eaten as a food. Wow. Okay. Maybe this has not inspired you to love Virginia Creeper and kudzu, but at least take another look at them. I mean, Virginia Creeper, super useful, like I said, for basketry is mainly how I use it. Great for making wreaths. I mean, you can make so many crafts. Bird houses, you can use them in various ways. I'll just put it that way. I'm not going to go in describing how to make Appalachian bird houses, but, you know, okay, usually they look like a little cabin, and they have a little porch, and it has a rail, and there's a little rocking chair and all. I mean, it's a birdhouse, right? And a shingled roof and all that, and you do moss for the grass and everything. Those things can sell for $400 a piece. I mean, literally, handmade Appalachian birdhouses are an excellent craft industry. And any vines like that can be very useful, even just to make like a hoop to hang it with, if you don't want to have it mounted on something. But baskets, wreaths, so many different things along those lines. And kudzu is just simply one of the most useful plants known to man. And we need to get over our bias against it and figure out how to use it. I mean, like the saying goes, eat the weeds. Definitely. I mean, I'd like to find a little piece of land pretty soon that isn't bear and coyote infested, so I could have some livestock. I'd be looking at dairy goats. I'd be looking at, you know, chickens and different things, all animals that would really like to eat kudzu. And so if I find a piece of property that's covered up in kudzu and nobody wants it, I know what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be going buy a herd of goats and a flock of chickens and probably just pretty much letting them kind of free range. I mean, you know, fence them into the property, but give them a permanent shelter and, you know, call them up and everything. Make sure predators can't get to them. You got to do that. But a thick canopy of kudzu is definitely going to protect chickens from hawks and such. And within a year or two, the goats would have it eaten down to just about nothing. And you'd have major production of meat and eggs and meat and milk and everything you want out of that. Feathers and leather and everything, you know, you're thinking along those lines for free. If you've got kudzu and water on your property. I mean, gosh, what a benefit that would be. Seriously. Maybe get some guinea fowl to make sure there are no snakes and ticks and fleas out there. They're really good at doing that. Guineas are also a great watchdog. If they'll drive you crazy if you're near them. Best to let them free range and just have at it. And I mean, I guess cows will do the same thing, but goats are really tenacious when it comes to really eating those vines down to nothing. I mean, they're pretty amazing actually. And there are other fowl that eat wheat or geese, ducks. I don't know. Chickens tend to also be particularly tenacious at eating plants they like. If you ever let the chickens get into your garden, that's pretty much it for your garden. But anyway, I've also found in my travels and study of plants that not all kudzu is equally invasive. I found several varieties of kudzu that don't really seem to spread much at all. They form a nice big vine. The seeds especially are not, they don't germinate very well. There was a vine I found down in Moore County, and my tests on the seed germination was like about 1 out of 200 would actually sprout. So you didn't have to worry, and probably even less than that, come to think of it. I mean, it was really low germination, about the lowest germination rate plant I've ever seen. So in that case, you didn't have to worry about birds spreading the seed. You only had to worry about the kudzu spreading by runners, where a vine touches the ground and starts to root. That could be easily controlled by goats. That could be easily controlled by chickens. That could easily be controlled by a human gardener that just walks around the plant once a week and cuts off all the runners. So, I mean, and it's also absolutely does not tolerate frost. Dies back at the first frost. So I think kudzu could really be a useful plant. I found it to be actually far less invasive than wisteria. Wisteria can really get out of control, and people plant wisteria ornamentally and don't think anything of it. Same with ivy, English ivy and the various forms. People plant it as, to decorate, and next thing you know, it's climbing and killing your trees. Kudzu can certainly do that, but because of its edible nature and its medicinal nature, and the fact if you're wanting to use the plant, I think you're going to have a better chance of controlling it, especially if you can find one that does not have a high germination rate from seed. Generally speaking, I don't think the plant really does have a very high germination rate from seed. So it may be illegal to grow in your area. It probably is if you're listening to this podcast. But if there's some already growing in your area, I would not go try and spray it with Roundup. I just learned to work with it, learn to live with it. Nice thick vines. I mean, you could build some beautiful like gazebos and pergolas with the thicker vines. I mean, you could really do stuff with that plant far beyond. Well, there's actually a book. Bill Shurtleff wrote a book on kudzu. It's called The Book of Kudzu. I did a video on it. I've mentioned it before. It's fantastic. Get a copy. I think you can find it on archive.org. He wrote it back in the 70s, or maybe even the 60s, at least early 70s. Look for The Book of Kudzu by Bill Shurtleff. Really, really good. It's going to give you some ideas. It's going to give you a lot of things you can work with. He doesn't get so much into the medicinal as the edible and fiber and form uses, I guess you would say, of the plant. But it's really going to surprise you. I have a copy. I probably dog-eared that thing a dozen times. It's just like, And I ran into a cop one time who was really into survival stuff. He was a Marine, injured Marine, retired, became a cop. Loved to do like the Survivor Man type of thing. I mean, or Dave Canterbury type stuff. Which I get into a little as well. And so we had a lot in common. And we were walking out of the parking lot, and his partner was just like putting up with us. He was getting sick of listening to our conversation. And he says to his partner, he says, "Can you spot the one plant around here that I think is essential that I would not do without? If I see that plant, I know I can survive." And his partner's looking around, he's like, "No, I don't see anything. That pine tree, I mean, you cut that down and have a fire or something." And he's like, "No, it's kudzu." behind the parking lot was just covered in kudzu. He's like, "What the hell are you gonna do with kudzu?" And he ran through the list, and his buddy's just like blown away. He's like, "I didn't know you could do anything with kudzu. Most people don't know you can do anything with kudzu." But he said, "I see that plant. I know I've got food. If it's the winter time, I got kindling for fire. I've got oh gosh," he went through a whole list of it. I mean, like I was saying, building a debris hut. Or really, sometimes the vines can be so tight, you can just kind of dig out underneath and just sleep right up under the growing canopy of kudzu. It's just really impressive, very impressive plant, very underutilized plant. So hopefully, you can look into that. And I'm not going to encourage you to do anything illegal, but chances are nobody's really going to know. So I'm going to leave that up to your own conscience. But remember, you're taking a risk if you break the law. I'm not going to encourage you to break the law. But I do think a lot of our laws are pretty stupid. What's one of the stupidest ones? Well, where I live in North Carolina, it's illegal to grow gooseberries or currants because there's a very, very slight chance that a very, very rare plant disease can be transferred from gooseberries and currants to Christmas trees. Meanwhile, the Christmas tree industry is going out of business because they have to spray everything down with so many chemicals that all the Christmas tree farmers and their workers are getting cancer. So meanwhile, I can't grow delicious gooseberries and currants, which grow perfectly well in my environment, but that's illegal. But, they're spraying their farms with stuff that's poisoning our water and getting everybody cancer. Don't get me started. Don't get me started on that. All right, y'all. Have a great week. Stay safe. Stay warm. Don't go driving around in snow and ice. Stay home. And if you possibly can, I understand emergency. Everybody's got to do what they got to do. Be smart. Be safe. Be warm. And I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.